Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me just say that we get it. Personal development can be hard, but you don't have to do it alone. Project Endure has been on a mission to create a supportive and inspiring community of people, all striving to be better together. Head down to the link in the show notes and join the Hard Things Club so that we can do hard things together. And if you're already a member, invite a friend and spread the love. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 97. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very special guest in Brooklyn, New York, Vanessa Moore. Vanessa, how are you?
Good. Thanks, Joe.
You're so welcome. I am very excited for this conversation. We got connected a few months back, and I've been waiting to record this podcast. Now, we got connected through Luke O'Brien, good friend of mine, friend of yours, episode 45 of this podcast. And any friend of Luke's is a good friend of mine off the bat, no questions asked. And I want you to introduce yourself to the audience, and then we can get into the stories from there. But how would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I grew up in Washington, D.C., although I spent most of my time as a kid in the Poconos Mountains in Pennsylvania. So falling in love with everything outdoors, fly fishing, hiking, camping. I consider that more to be home for me. Education was really important to my family, so I remember a lot of 2 a.m. nights before I was even 18, and really worked really hard. And then I guess that paid off because I ended up going to Princeton, where I studied engineering. Before that, I took a gap year. I backpacked in Latin America for a semester, and then I danced with a hip hop group in DC for a semester. I continued dancing at Princeton, and then after school, I did another little gap semester where I lived in a van for 3 months and traveled around the national parks. So I'm a huge fan of taking time off when you can swing it. And then after that, moved to New York City, worked in New York City for a few years, then took another stint away working remotely, but doing the digital nomad lifestyle, Airbnb to Airbnb, before moving back to New York, where I am now in Brooklyn. So that's the short on me.
Wow. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm hoping we get to all of it. But to rewind, just a funny anecdote from my life. When I was looking at colleges, I remember going to look at Princeton with my parents. And at the time, I went and I didn't like it. But my reasoning for not liking it was because it looked like a scene out of Harry Potter. I remember telling my parents that, and they laughed at me. They didn't understand it. And looking back, I can laugh now because that's ridiculous. It's such a beautiful campus and a great school, and a great area. But I was just young and a little bit immature. So, yeah. How did you get into dancing? Let's start there.
um, I I think honestly, I started from watching reality TV and um, loving So You Think You Can Dance. I don't know if you know that show, but my mom and I would watch it in the kitchen, and I fell in love with that show, and I would dance in my kitchen. And then eventually that became one dance lesson, which became many. So yeah, I don't know. I love to move. I'm always on the go. I think maybe somewhat like you. And it was a really good outlet for me.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there one life lesson that you could extract from your experience in dance
Mhm.
that maybe applies to everybody?
Yes, probably just like release is such an important thing. And whether it's through dance or through some other form, through screaming, whatever it may be, like being able to have that sense of release where you let everything go, I think is just like really helpful and healing.
Mm. In a different way, is your love for time away from work and time traveling and doing those kinds of things just a different form of release?
Totally. Yeah, I think I'm somebody who like knows that I push myself really hard, but then also 100% need to recuperate and sometimes struggle to like find that recuperation in my everyday. So when I like go in phases of pushing myself really hard and then like really relaxing and recouping and exploring and then I'm like ready to go again.
Yeah. Now, are you a runner? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I almost view life, I think people always say life is a marathon, and you could use that analogy. I almost see my own life as a series of sprints. And it sounds like that's what you're describing for your own life, where you sprint and then you catch your breath and sprint and catch your breath. And I would say that's not as common as I think it should be. I think more people should view life like that. And I think that your breaks between the sprints are also longer than most people take. Do you feel like you ever get out of rhythm or have trouble finding rhythm with the choppiness of sprint and rest and sprint and rest?
I don't. I think that like there's always that little drive inside me that's like ready to go for the next challenge. And so um that I don't think I could ever get stuck in the rest even though it might be best. But yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite trip that you've taken or a favorite kind of break that you've taken?
Um my favorite place in the US is Glacier National Park, which is unbelievable. So anybody who listens should go there immediately. It's the most beautiful place, maybe in the world. So that 100%. The peaks are great, and the water is so blue, and the animals are all over the place. It's just amazing. But one sort of funnier rest period during my gap year in between high school and college. I remember one specific week where I did not change out of pajamas once and I just did puzzles and drank tea. And that was like the ultimate rest.
I would lose my mind. I like to think that I have patience for a lot of things. Puzzles is not one of them. And the situation you just described is a nightmare in my books, but to each their own. And if it works, it works. Now, with some of that behind us, and we're laughing and smiling, I know the direction that this conversation is headed because we've talked before this podcast. And so I'll preface the audience with, we're going to take a shift here, and I'm going to ask you the first question of the podcast, and I'm just going to listen. And I know this is going to be powerful, but if you look back at your life thus far, what's the hardest thing or circumstance that you've had to handle that you didn't get to choose for yourself?
Yeah. So, June 26th, 2021, my cousin Teddy passed away. And by far, that was the hardest and is the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. I I remember that day very vividly. I happened to be together with my family unit of four: mom, dad, younger brother, and we were sharing a hotel room. And I woke up, and my mom was sitting on the bed next to us, and she sat my brother and myself down and said, "Something very bad has happened." And I've been really fortunate in my life to like really not go through a lot of hardship and haven't really had much experience with death before. So my brain went to the worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario wasn't even close to what was coming. So she told me that my cousin Teddy had passed away in a car accident. Um, And I remember thinking immediately, no, you're wrong. Probably he was really badly hurt, but he's probably going to recover from this, or um, like maybe they made a mistake. But yeah, that by far was the hardest.
I'm so sorry for your loss. And maybe to put things in greater perspective for the audience, could you tell us a little bit about who Teddy was and what he meant to you?
Yeah. So Teddy was my older cousin. Our families are incredibly close. Um, he was this magical person, and I'll do my best to describe him, but anybody who knows him knows that it's very hard to. Um, he was this tall, good-looking stud athlete. He was the captain of the Princeton soccer team, hence why I wanted to go there. Um, he ran marathons, did an Ironman. Um, he also was like the life of every party. He walked into a room and the energy shifted. Like people felt immediately like they were all part of this new experience almost. Um, like if it was a party setting, then the party became more fun. If it was like a share circle, everybody took it more seriously. He just like had this sort of magic to him, and he would wear like beautiful Italian suits with animal print loafers, and somehow it worked. um, he just like really had this air to him, and when you were talking to him, he deeply cared about everything that was going on in your life and wanted to help and wanted to follow up with you. And many of my friends met him, and then he got them jobs. He just like really was such a giver. Um, and so as a young girl growing up, he made me really proud to be part of my family. He made it cool to be vulnerable around each other, and um, he like really brought our family unit together by so frequently sharing outwardly how much he loved everyone. He he told me in his last few years, as I was sort of getting older, um, that if I ever needed anything, no matter what hour of the night, just call him. And he jokingly said, I'll respond and say, what do you need, money or a gun? And I'll be there. Obviously, joke, but that's just like who he was. He would always show up. I think there are probably 20 plus people who consider him their best friend in the world. So yeah, he's this magical person that will always live on for us.
There's a Winnie the Pooh quote that I'd like to share. Winnie the Pooh once said, "How lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard." And I Teddy was that for you, and it sounds like for so many other people. And the fact that you're able to talk about him and live the way you live because of him, means that he lives on today through you and through everybody who knew him, which is such a beautiful thing. If you don't mind me asking, it's been 2 years or almost 2 years since you lost Teddy. How have you grappled with the fact that something so tragic happened to someone so good?
Yeah. Um, in some ways, we're still reaping the benefits of how um, special of a person he was, because he so clearly stood for living an amazing life and being the best version of yourself, which is really why Project Endure really resonated with me. But he just like stood for those things. And so it's almost um, it would be a disservice to him to completely shut down. And I think everyone in my family knew that immediately. And it was hard to to grapple with it, and obviously it takes time and will continue to take time. But in my eulogy, I sort of talked about how, if we can take a little bit of what Teddy did every day, making ourselves better people into our everyday, then we'll make the world a better place and do it for him. So, yeah, in some ways, he's still teaching us and leading us every day, and like reminding us that we are so fortunate to have our lives, and we should be really intentional with them.
Yeah. I've had a few episodes now where the hardest thing someone's ever had to handle has been losing a loved one. And I've built up the courage to ask this question because I know it can be an emotional one. But if Teddy were sitting in the room with you or on the other end of this podcast or just still here and you could say anything that you wanted to him, what would you tell him?
Mm. I think probably just that, like, we miss him a lot, and that we love him a lot, and that we're not afraid or scared or fault him in any way for leaving us, and that, like, we're still carrying him on every day. I think one of the scariest parts about losing someone is that, um, on probably on both sides, the person leaving and people staying, you're afraid that somebody's going to go away in some way, like
Mhm.
the memory of them will leave, or yeah, there'll be a time where you no longer remember. And I think like that is just not a possibility. And there's so many things that we do to make sure that legacy continues. But I think like that's one of my own fears about dying one day, that you just sort of are erased, and that's kind of crazy. But I think like I would just say like, you're here, you're always here, you're here all the time. We talk about we talk about the dishwasher turning on randomly, and that's Teddy. And then there's a beautiful rainbow, and when we look out into the ocean, we feel him there, and there's specific moments where it's really, really tangible.
Yeah. I can't remember if I've shared this on a previous episode or not, but my grandfather passed away 10 years ago. And at his funeral, I remember seeing a penny on the ground and I looked down at it and I just ignored it and kept moving on. And my grandfather's sister, so my great aunt, asked me why I didn't pick it up. And I said, it's just a penny. And she said, it's a penny from heaven. It means your grandfather's looking down on you. So I picked it up. And I swear, over the next 3, 4 months, I found multiple dollars worth of pennies just all over the place. And I don't think those things are coincidences. And I know Teddy is with you. I know he's looking down on you and smiling and really proud. There's one more quote that I want to share and get your thoughts on. This one's from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler, and it goes, "The reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You'll learn to live with it. You will heal and you will rebuild around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same. Nor should you be the same, nor would you want to." And I would love to hear your thoughts on that as somebody who is rebuilding after losing Teddy.
I have so many thoughts on that actually. Um, I I guess that my first thought is, um, 100% I feel like a completely different person, and um, I I honestly didn't realize previously how much the emotional and physical well-being is connected. And like going through something like that, you really realize like, wow, my body is in tune with my mind, and there's just like so much happening. And um I think I just have way more respect for like mental health professionals, and people who spend their lives helping people through hard times, because my eyes have totally been open to the physical impacts of trauma. So that's one thing that I've definitely learned. And um, another is I feel like um, I just want to be really, really intentional about how I spend my time and what I do with my life. And it sort of like opened up my eyes to how precious life is and how fleeting it can be. So um, I do feel like I've shifted in many ways to like focus on being really intentional. And one way is I completely stopped drinking alcohol. And my cousin Teddy's sister and I both just completely quit drinking because we felt like it wasn't always making us our best selves. And so that's been one amazing positive change in my life since then.
Really cool. Yeah. I also haven't had a drink in a long, long time and don't miss it. Do you ever miss it, or are you at the point where it's, yeah?
No, I don't. At first, I would miss a cold beer after a hike and like a glass of red wine with a steak. But actually, the non-alcoholic beers and wines are pretty good. So I've kind of gotten into that in the last few months.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right, from here, is there anything else that you'd like to share about all of this, about Teddy, about your experience grieving his loss, and just helping him live on through everything that you do before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I think one thing that we has really helped me when Teddy passed, one of his friends shared with us that there was a marathon in Missoula, Montana, on the 1 year anniversary of his passing. And Teddy's favorite book was A River Runs Through It, which takes place in Missoula. And so we felt like that was a really amazing way to honor him. And so um, all of us really none of us were really runners before, myself included. I'd run a little bit, but um, we all decided to spend the year training for that marathon. And we ran the marathon on the 1 year of his passing in Missoula. There were probably 20 first-time marathoners and another 20 half marathoners. And it was a really, really special moment.
Do you have any special memories from that race in particular? Were there any kind of highs or lows that stick out to you from the experience?
Yeah, I think first of all, Missoula is a beautiful place, and so running there was just stunning. There was a moment around mile 3 where we were running alongside a farm, and these horses started running, like following us, basically. So that was amazing. And then, yeah, I think just like feeling a lot of sense of accomplishment at the end. Running's such a community sport. People say it's an individual sport, but it's such a community sport, and it felt really, really special to be there, finishing with tons of family, tons of friends, and yeah, the training really paid off.
So since then, have you run other marathons?
I ran one in December. I ran the Philly Marathon. Yeah, and that was also amazing. I think that was another like lifetime highlight. It was uh, really a really special one too.
Are you hooked now? Are you a lifetime runner?
I'm not sure. I'm definitely hooked on the running community. I would love to run Boston at some point, so I'm trying within the next year to Boston qualify. After hopefully Boston, I I'm not sure what the next challenge will be, but there's definitely another challenge, whether it's maybe a triathlon or maybe something else. We'll see.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to see what that is for you. And speaking of running, I'm curious, when you look at your entire life, what's the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose? And why have you done that thing? And I'll acknowledge it might not be running. I just think that running is a very hard thing. So, what's the hardest thing you've ever done?
Yeah, I think it is running, and I think it's marathon training, and going from 0, basically me running a mile or 5 a week to 40 a week, was by far the hardest thing, but, um, also the most rewarding. I think some people say that the actual marathon is way worse, but for me, I've been blessed to have amazing marathon experiences, both of them. Um, I didn't geek out or have any problems, which is awesome. So I like totally believe in the training process. And if you do it every day, you'll get there and it's best for your body and being
Mm.
smart about all of it. Yeah, training for sure.
Out of the both marathons that you ran, which training buildup was more challenging?
Probably the first one because there were so many unknowns for me, and I'm a very data-driven person
Mm.
and, a big planner, so I like to know what's coming, how it's gonna work. I think my physical therapist was ready to kill me with all the questions I was asking. I pretty much wanted him to tell me what foods exactly I should eat for the 6 months leading up to the marathon. But yeah, the first one also had a lot of weight on it, and I just, like, really had to make sure that I made it to the finish line no matter what. And then the second one, was more I knew how it worked, I knew how to do it, and I had a lot more confidence, so
Mm. You know what? It's funny that you said you're a data-driven person because at one point, New Balance put out the tagline, marathoning, the triumph of desire over reason. And I take that as, if you're going off of data and reason and logic, who in their mind would run 26.2 miles? But it's that desire. It's that desire for something hard, for something more, for the growth that comes out of the struggle. And the struggle is not just the race, like you said, it's also the training. And so, for context, I'd actually like to look at, what did the training look like? Being that you have a job that sounds demanding from what you've told me. So let's start there. What do you do for work? And does that take up a lot of your time and energy?
yeah. I work at CB Insights. It's a tech intelligence platform. So we do all sorts of data and research on private tech companies. I'm on the product team there. So I'm a product data scientist. So I'm building and scaling lots of different research products. Um, it is pretty demanding. I usually should finish around 7. So there are worse jobs. um, but I'm also not a morning person, unlike you. So I cannot get myself up to work out in the morning, otherwise I will just be exhausted for the whole day. So training for me is in the evenings. It feels like my break from my day, and it feels like the only time during the day that is 100% for me. And so it's like my break. I love it. On Mondays, I do an easy run. On Tuesdays, I have a hard track workout. Wednesdays, strength training for runners. Thursday, usually a hill day. Friday, easy. Saturday, off. Sunday, long run. So that's my training schedule. Um I think the data driven component is is probably similar to the way that you think about your own training, which I think is like just being very consistent and regimented. And so for me, like I believe in my training program, and I have an amazing coach who has been teaching me how to do training properly. And so I believe like in the miles he's setting for me and the paces he's setting for me. And so if I'm consistently hitting my paces and trying my best, giving my best effort, then I believe 100% that I will be able to hit the targets that I'm going for. So that's how I think about it in a data driven approach.
Yeah, the data makes sense. And I think for me, there's this line between data and intuition that sometimes is hard to navigate because I also, like you, believe in the data. And then there's also this part of me that just wants to go by feel. And sometimes mixing and balancing those two can be challenging, which I think is nice to have a coach to be able to say, hey, this is the plan. And as the client or as the runner, the athlete, you're bought into that and you're trusting that, and it takes the guesswork out and you just have to put your head down and work. I think that's really nice. Now, a question back to your earlier comment about running being a time just for you. I think running is this beautiful thing where you can be present, you're with your thoughts, you don't have other distractions around you because you can't be sending emails or on social media, or it is just you and the pavement or the trail. And on the flip side, for myself, and I know for a lot of others, running is time consuming in a very unique way because you can't do other things.
Mm.
And so, for example, if I go to the gym and lift for an hour or two, I can send messages in between my sets. I can create a social media post. I can do other things. And so, even though I'm dedicating an hour or two to training, I'm still able to get these little odds and ends done. And that works well for my schedule. Where running, it is just all consuming and it's beautiful and hard because of that. Do you struggle with that at all? Or is it simply just a beautiful way to escape?
I think I think the latter. I think I need it. I need that time to just think and like process things, and for me the whole first year especially, it was my dedicated time to think about Teddy and feel connected to him. And so um I briefly talked about how there's that fear that somebody's going to go away. But for me, having that every day felt like, okay, every day I'm with Teddy, no questions asked, like it will happen. And so um, it's just like this good space for me to heal, and running. Like I really truly never was somebody who liked running before this. And I think maybe it's that, what is it, the 10,000 hours thing, where if you do it enough you fall in love with it and become, I don't know, some sort of expert. That's probably not true for me, but um I think I've completely shifted to needing it and loving it. And when you're just like fully giving it your everything and your legs are flying, it feels, maybe it's the same thing as dance too. It just feels so freeing, like a release, and being present with my thoughts. It's like my time to process and synthesize.
Mm. That word release came up again. Are there non-physical ways that you find release from some of the stresses and emotions that build up in the day to day?
Yeah, I think when I spend time with friends and feel like really present with them, that's a moment of release. I come home later and feel like, wow, like that was a really meaningful conversation, and I'm really grateful for that. Um, yeah, I think there definitely are other moments of that.
Mm. I'll share two things. One is believe it's usually called the 5 second rule. And it's for people who are feeling things that maybe they normally would not express. So maybe they're angry or sad or frustrated or whatever it is. Instead of bottling it up, take 5 seconds to feel whatever you need to feel. If you need to feel sorry for yourself for 5 seconds or 5 minutes or whatever the rule is. If you need to scream into a pillow, go do that for 5 seconds. If you need to go punch a punching bag, go take 5 minutes. But then after that time has passed, you move on. And I think that's a good rule of thumb that can be malleable for anybody's circumstances or situations. So I just figured I'd throw that out there. And then the other part is podcasting these conversations for me are a release. And I didn't put that together until just a minute ago when we started this part of the conversation, because you can get lost in somebody else's story. You can get, you're so immersed in a conversation that you forget about all of the other stresses and things that are going on in your life, and you leave feeling refreshed, even if it takes energy to have that conversation. I always feel more full afterward. And so thank you for this, because so far this has been a great release for me.
Yeah, I agree. This is a this is a conversation that I'm sure I will feel afterwards, that sense of release. And growing up, I remember as a young kid, my mom taught me that when you feel really angry, you're supposed to go into your turtle shell and you're supposed to hunch your shoulders and clasp your fists and hold them together and count to 10 and then let go. And then you're supposed to feel better. So maybe I should go back to my turtle shell days and try to feel released that way as well.
I guess you might have to be careful where you go into your turtle shell out in public, because you might get some looks. But I think that's a great concept, right? Embrace what you're feeling, connect the body and the mind, turn that emotional tension into physical tension, and then let it go. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked a little bit about running. The next question I want to ask you is about the word endurance. When you hear the word endurance, what comes to mind for you?
Um, I think about like making it through long periods, whether that's physical or mental. I think it can be both at the same time. Um, just like getting through something, and not giving up, sticking with it, being consistent and pushing through, to me, like what endurance means.
Mm. In the context of losing Teddy and the hardest thing you've ever had to handle, and looking forward to the rest of your life, what does endurance look like there?
Yeah. Um, I think it's continuing to live this way that he lived, and like be trying to continually be the best version of myself and bettering myself and being reflective and really like living intentionally. For me, that's enduring. And um there are plenty of bad days and there are plenty of good days, and not feeling guilty about the good days is really important, and making sure that you're you're still living the way that makes you feel most fulfilled. So yeah, I think that's what it means to me, being present and being grateful and living the way that Teddy lived.
Can you unpack that phrase, not feeling guilty for the good days, a little bit more?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guilt that comes with grieving often, and it can be hard to um, it can be hard to have really happy moments. I think like there were a few times where in the most happy moments I felt the most sad. And I remember one particular moment very shortly after he passed. A bunch of family and friends were dancing and we were having this beautiful evening, and it just like all came crashing down. And suddenly it felt so horrible that he wasn't there with us having that moment. And it can, I think it just sometimes can be hard to like have these good moments. And sometimes those are the moments where you miss people the most. But it's important not to feel guilty about that, because also that's exactly what the person would want you to be doing. And I think it's also on the other side important to allow yourself to feel that way too, and to feel like you miss that person because you're acknowledging that they're gone and that you wish they were there, and that's also okay.
Outside of using running as an outlet and some of the other releases that we spoke about, is there anything in particular that's helped you thus far as you process all of this and as you grieve?
Yeah, I think really connecting with people and making sure that people who you really care about know that you really care about them. And I'm definitely somebody who feels things very deeply, and um like always wants to be there for somebody, and I think it's just important to vocalize that often, and make sure that the people around you know how much you love them, and it's not cheesy or weird to say it all the time. Just say it because it feels good for you and it feels good for them. And um it can feel it can feel lonely in this world, and maybe that one text makes a difference in someone's day or in someone's life, who knows. So for me, just like trying to make sure that um I remind people that I love them, and that I really care about them, and that I will, like Teddy said, for me, drop everything and come be with them if they need me.
I don't know why this is coming to me right now, but as a child, I was a weird kid in a lot of ways. I had a lot of quirks, but one of them was not being able to leave my house or go to bed at night without specifically giving my parents and siblings hugs and telling them that I love them.
Mm.
And that's stuck with me to this day. And now it's my wife and my dog when I leave my house every day. But I take it for granted that that's something I do. And I think this conversation has reignited the meaning behind that for me. There's also a quote that I would love to share that sounds like it encapsulates Teddy in a lot of ways. It's from Roy T. Bennett, who said, "Be the reason someone smiles, be the reason someone feels loved and believes in the goodness in people." And it's such a simple concept, but you're so right. We don't know what other people are going through. We interact with people who are in all different life seasons and stages, and behind the scenes you don't know how much somebody is hurting, and it could be just smiling, it could be holding a door, it could be sending a text message, or simply expressing deeply and authentically to another person how much they mean to you. And I think this is a great reminder for all of us to do more of that.
Totally. I think um there's so many little ways that we can just be kinder people throughout the everyday. And if you do those things, we all know how to do them. We just sometimes get caught up in our own world. And if we do those things, it makes a difference. And I think the whole world, your whole community can be a little bit happier if you send that text, if you hold that door, if you ask the coffee barista how her day's going. Like all of these little things really do matter.
My wife will laugh if she's listening to this part of the podcast, because I am the person who asks the cashier at the grocery store how their day's going. If they have a name tag, I address them by their name. And there's this one cashier at a grocery store near the gym that I go to. His name's Tim, and Tim and I built a friendship. And Tim actually ended up going to the gym that I go to because he saw me come from that gym every single day. And Tim actually came to our Project Endure event this year. And, I would consider Tim a friend. And it would have been very easy the first time I ever crossed paths with him to just keep my head down, mind my own business, and not introduce myself or have conversation. And it's just something I do. And I think this is another great reminder for other people to just realize that the other people we're interacting with are humans. And by making somebody else feel seen and heard and cared for, I think we open ourselves up to being able to be the same, to be seen and cared for and heard. And so this has just been such an impactful conversation. And we have one final question. And this question is my favorite because it allows the guest to speak to the audience directly, no matter what they're going through or what they're feeling. So, people listening to this podcast might be struggling with things that we know nothing about. Everybody goes through hard times. If you right now have the chance to speak directly to somebody on the other end of the podcast who is going through a really hard, potentially dark season of life, what would you say to them?
Well, I feel like I can only speak to going through grief, but um, I would I would say what helped me, and I'm a big fan of tangible feedback, so hopefully this is like a pretty concrete piece of advice. But what's helped me is having that time every single day dedicated to thinking or feeling close to my cousin. And so whether that's running or meditation or just the 10 minutes you're drinking your coffee in the morning, if it feels like you're feeling those feelings of um, am I going to lose my memories of this person, are they going to go away from my life, those sorts of thoughts, I found having that dedicated time every single day to focus on thinking about that person and feeling really connected to them helped me tremendously.
There's a Thomas Campbell quote that will be my last promise. I've shared a lot of quotes on this episode already, but he said, "To live in the hearts we leave behind is not to die." And by creating that space and honoring that person, spending time with that person, they'll never die. They'll just live on in your heart and through your life every single day. And so, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today. Thank you for honoring Teddy through this conversation. Thank you for showing up even when it's hard. I know this conversation will impact a lot of people, especially those going through the grieving process. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap this up?
Thanks so much for having me, Joe. This has been an awesome conversation. I think the number one reason why I connected with Project Endure was because this idea of becoming the best version of yourself. And I think Project Endure like totally 100% embodies that. And I absolutely love the do hard things to to push yourself to become better, to not be complacent. I just think that's so meaningful and powerful, and I'm such a big fan.
That means the world, Vanessa. Now, if people want to reach out, if people want to follow along with what you have going on, or they just want to connect, where's the best place for them to do that?
I guess my Instagram maybe. I did create it when I was 13. So it is more with M00RE the merrier. That's me, Vanessa Moore.
You know, you could change the name, right? Not saying
Yeah,
you should. I like it. I like it.
it's stuck. I'm not embarrassed.
Vanessa, again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for this conversation. I feel refreshed. I feel a renewed sense of both urgency and gratitude for the life that we get and for this day. So I can't wait to talk again soon. And just thank you again.
Thanks so much, Joe.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Endure Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.